Hello, my name is Patricia, and I currently live in a small annex attached to my in-laws' home, along with my husband, Willie. While I occupy the annex alone, Willie resides in the main house with his parents. This annex, initially a modest project by Willie's grandfather, intended as a personal retreat, has been transformed into a livable space about the size of a standard room, thanks to my efforts. Willie and I had lived in a regular apartment for the first 4 years of our marriage. However, his parents, who are very fond of him, unexpectedly expressed a wish for him to return home. Moved by his duty as a son and touched by his parents' longing, complete with tears and hugs, Willie decided to move back in with them. This left me somewhat surprised and overwhelmed by their emotional display. Willie and I first met at work, where he started as my subordinate, joining the company midway through his career. We dated for 4 years while he lived at his parents' home, which seems to have deepened a sense of nostalgia and homesickness for him and his parents. Despite living on his own after our marriage, Willie's upbringing, characterized by considerable pampering and little involvement in household tasks, seemed to draw him back to the familiarity and comfort of his parental home. When I suggested we share the household chores, Willie seemed hesitant and admitted he had never really been involved in such tasks before. Despite my hopes to equally divide the responsibilities, Willie had never even considered taking part in them. I noticed a recurring pattern. Every time I tried to get him involved, he would feign interest momentarily, then quickly lose enthusiasm and conclude, "This isn't for me, Patricia. You're better at it. You should just keep doing it." Both of us were working full-time, but as I held a higher position at my job, I felt a stronger urge to distribute the domestic duties. Yet, trying to get Willie to contribute often ended up being more exhausting than just doing everything myself. Eventually, I found it simpler to manage all the tasks on my own. The dynamic in our home began to change when I switched to working remotely. Willie, initially surprised to see me at home every day, seemed to adjust to the new arrangement, or so I believed. Over time, however, it became clear that he hadn't fully understood what my working from home entailed. A few years into my remote work, Willie's parents made a sudden visit to our apartment, expressing their desire to live closer to him. Witnessing their emotional reunion made me feel isolated and confused. Eventually, respecting Willie's desire to be closer to his parents, we decided to move into their house. Throughout our relationship, Willie consistently chose locations near his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or selecting a job. For me, since I was working remotely, the location had become irrelevant. But Willie's decisions often meant we had to uproot ourselves and even quit our jobs. Upon moving into his parents' home, Willie's mother warmly expressed her gratitude, saying, "Thank you for taking care of Willie all this time. From now on, I will take good care of him. Patricia, please handle everything else." Initially, I thought this meant I'd be relieved from the daily chores related to Willie, but I soon realized her true intentions were quite different. My mother-in-law took it upon herself to cater to Willie's specific needs. She prepared special meals just for him, washed and ironed only his clothes, kept his shoes and belongings pristine, and purchased various personal items exclusively for him. Meanwhile, all other household chores, including cooking and laundry for Willie's parents and myself, were now my responsibility. Despite my full-time job commitments, I found myself burdened with not only managing our daily tasks, but also maintaining the cleanliness of the larger family home. This new arrangement left me feeling disheartened. Although this living situation seemed to bring joy to Willie and his parents, it offered no apparent benefits to me. My responsibilities seemed to have multiplied. During one cleaning session, my father-in-law came to me with a hesitant request. He looked apologetic as he said, "Patricia, I have a favor to ask. Could you contribute some money?" Confused, I asked him to explain further. He shared his difficulty in asking Willie to contribute financially, adding, "Willie has worked hard and it feels challenging to ask him for financial contributions." This revelation added to the complexity of our living dynamics, highlighting the uneven distribution of both chores and financial responsibilities. Willie and I had previously agreed to share expenses such as our apartment rent and other living costs. However, during our shopping trips, Willie often persuaded me to pay for various items, including non-essential ingredients, alcohol, clothes, and accessories. When I expressed reluctance, he would react childishly, accusing me of being stingy. Despite these financial disagreements, I took some comfort in the fact that, aside from these issues, Willie didn't interfere much with my everyday life. This semblance of peace changed dramatically when we began living together at his parents' house. Unlike Willie, his mother actively disrupted my routine. She consistently interrupted my work from home, insisting that I prioritize household chores over my professional duties. She would even barge into my room and tug on my clothing, making it exceedingly difficult for me to concentrate on my tasks. Feeling frustrated, I brought up the issue with Willie, half expecting him to side with his mother. To my surprise, Willie listened attentively and promised to speak with her about the interruptions. I was hopeful for a compromise that would address both our needs. Little did I know that Willie's idea of a compromise was quite different from what I envisioned. It involved relocating me to the annex, a separate structure on their property, suggesting a new level of separation rather than integration. One day, somewhat jokingly, I approached Willie with a question about the annex, asking if I could demolish it and build a new house in its place. To my astonishment, he casually responded, "You can even demolish it and build a new house if you want." This casual remark opened up unexpected possibilities for our living arrangement, suggesting a level of autonomy I hadn't anticipated. Taking Willie's words to heart, I promptly began remodeling the annex to suit my tastes. As I cleaned, renovated, and changed the wallpapers, I noticed that Willie never once appeared to check on the progress. As I transformed the space, it became clear that Willie had no intention of living in the remodeled annex with me. This realization struck me hard. Within the family living trio, I was the outsider. There were times when I found myself alone at home, when they would go out to a barbecue restaurant, or during times I had to work late and missed communal meals. These outings, often orchestrated by Willie's mother, seemed deliberately planned. It appeared she might have been pushing for my exclusion, perhaps hoping I would leave her son. Despite these dynamics, Willie had given me complete freedom with the annex, and I seized this opportunity to make the space truly my own. I threw myself into DIY projects, installing new shelves and personalizing every corner. Interestingly, after I moved out, neither Willie nor his parents ever visited the annex. They must have been aware of the renovations, yet they showed no interest in my activities, reinforcing the feeling that I was no longer considered part of the family. Living away from the main house, especially without the constant presence of Willie's mother, I began to relish my newfound independence. It felt almost like living alone, which was surprisingly liberating. I found solace in the fact that residing in the annex kept her from interfering with my work. During the renovation, I even installed new locks and enhanced the security, further marking the annex as my sanctuary away from the family dynamics. I made sure that no one, not even Willie or his parents, could enter the annex without my permission. This new level of privacy made me reconsider whether this separation might be a blessing in disguise. However, it seemed my mother-in-law had already sensed my growing detachment and was not about to let me find peace easily. No longer able to endure her behavior, I found myself at a crossroads contemplating my next steps. As I settled into the renovated annex, my mother-in-law's desperation to drive me away became increasingly evident. Her subtle harassment began with minor annoyances like leaving trash in front of my cabin on garbage day rather than at the collection site. Sometimes she would host barbecues in the garden, deliberately omitting me from the guest list while ensuring the tantalizing smell of grilled meat wafted my way. Despite these efforts, I couldn't help but smile at the futility of her attempts to push me out. Then, one day, she summoned me to the main house under the pretense of offering leftover meat and potatoes. Sensing there was more to her invitation, I went along. Upon my arrival, I found her alone in the living room. With a dramatic flourish, she placed a single piece of paper on the table, a divorce paper. It was evident that her real motive was to force this document upon me, knowing that if she instructed Willie to proceed with it, he would comply without question. All that was left was for me to agree, and Willie and I could be officially divorced by simply submitting the paper to the city court. With a smug expression, his mother declared, "Isn't it about time you gave up? There's no reason for you and Willie to stay married anymore. Get out, you freeloading, unemployed woman." I was taken aback by her audacity, but her certainty only fueled my resolve. Excited by the prospect of freedom, I eagerly grabbed the divorce paper, exclaiming, "I'm going to the city court right now. Thank you so much." My mother-in-law, who had likely expected me to resist the divorce, was left dumbfounded by my unexpected enthusiasm. After submitting the divorce papers at the city court, I wasted no time packing my belongings. Feeling it was necessary to inform Willie's mother about the finalized divorce, I headed to the main house. There, I informed her that the process had been successful. Regarding the cabin I had renovated, I told her I would leave it as it was, and she was free to demolish it or use it as she pleased. My positive attitude about leaving seemed to surprise even my mother-in-law, who, despite seeming happy about my departure, wished me luck. On the day I left, Willie and his father, seemingly realizing I was truly leaving, expressed their concern. "Are you going? What will we do without Patricia?" they asked. I smiled and thanked them for letting me use the cabin. I explained that since there was no point in staying married anymore, and now that we were divorced, it was time for me to move on. As I organized my belongings, I completed my move to a luxury apartment, a change I had been planning for some time. Not long after settling into my new apartment, my mother-in-law called me, her tone awkward as she started, "Patricia." Cheerfully answering my mother-in-law's call, I opened with a lighthearted inquiry. "What's up? How's everything going with the cabin I'm currently using?" She shifted gears to a more serious topic, mentioning finances. Specifically, she brought up that Willie had informed her I was giving his father $5,000 a month. Confirming her statement, I explained that contrary to her previous accusations of me being an unemployed freeloader, I was indeed gainfully employed. Her surprise was evident over the phone. She had been under the impression that I had left my job entirely. I quickly set the record straight, clarifying that I hadn't just left my previous job, but had moved on to become the president of a new company. This company, I elaborated, was pioneering a remote work system, positioning itself at the forefront of modern work environments. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief and confusion, prompting a sigh from me. It dawned on me that Willie, too, was in the dark about my professional ascent, which highlighted the distance between us, not just physically, but in our perceptions of each other. Since moving in with his parents, it became clear he never fully embraced his role as a husband. She then inquired about my earnings, curious if my new role had also boosted my income. I offhandedly mentioned that it was roughly around $3 million. This figure was admittedly an exaggeration, more of a simplification to avoid delving into the complexities of my actual earnings. Seizing on this, she shifted the conversation. "With that much money, could you lend us some? Your father-in-law was laid off and he kept it hidden. We've been managing somehow with the $5,000 you've been giving us, and neither Willie nor I were aware of his job loss." This revelation brought clarity to a previous conversation I had with my father-in-law. where he mentioned how pitiful it felt to ask his son for money. I now understood that his earlier words were a facade, likely a strategic move to elicit financial support from me, banking on the assumption that my superior professional position implied substantial wealth. This maneuver, while cunning, painted a clearer picture of the financial dynamics within Willie's family and their expectations of me. At our former company, they subtly maneuvered to extract $5,000 a month from me under the guise of shared living expenses. In hindsight, I didn't mind too much at the time because it allowed me to live peacefully in the quiet cabin. But now, being divorced from Willie, I see no ties that bind me to his family anymore. When I mentioned this disconnect, my mother-in-law urgently pleaded, "That's not true. To me and Willie, you're still family. Please come back to us." I immediately declined, fully aware of the potential to be exploited once more. Re-entering a relationship with Willie offered no benefits. We were now strangers, and it was uncomfortable for them to still claim me as family, especially since they were the ones who pushed me out originally. I'm really enjoying my life on my own now. It feels much the same as when I was married, mostly living alone. The difference is that back then, I didn't spend money on myself, and $5,000 was siphoned from me every month. I much prefer my current life. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call without hesitation, puzzled as to why they thought I would ever return. For my mother-in-law, it must have been a last-ditch effort. In reality, Willie's salary wasn't impressive, and he had a consistent habit of avoiding responsibilities, often saying, "I can't do it," and passing tasks on to others. This trait, prevalent in both our personal and professional lives, rendered him unreliable, and he remained a regular employee without any salary advancements. Furthermore, with his father laid off and his mother a housewife, they struggled to maintain their large house and eventually had to sell it. Now, all three of them are living in the cabin I renovated. While it's just right for one person, it must be quite cramped and uncomfortable for three. Since then, I haven't given them much thought and continue to live my life peacefully, savoring the solitude and freedom that come with my new independence.